In the 80s and 90s, two franchises defined what beat-em-ups were in video games: Double Dragon and Streets of Rage. They owned the streets and the arcades. Decades later, both returned, but in very different ways. Streets of Rage 4 arrived first and was acclaimed for revitalizing the genre. Now Double Dragon Revive arrives to reclaim the throne that was once its. The question that remains is, which of these giants truly represents the pinnacle of modern beat-em-ups? Today we're putting the Lee brothers against Axel and Blaze's team to decide, once and for all, who is the true king. Streets of Rage 4 has the upper hand in the visual department when compared to Double Dragon Revive, and it's hard not to fall in love with the vibrant, hand-drawn art style that the Lizard Cube team managed to deliver. The game doesn't try to follow polygon trends or extravagant 3D effects. It renews the beat-em-up by bringing characters, scenarios, and movements with comic-inspired strokes, remaining faithful to the essence of the classic games, but adding a layer of sophistication that the old ones could never achieve. Each blow is represented by expressive sprites and extremely fluid animations, a true lesson in how to modernize a classic without losing its DNA. Double Dragon Revive, on the other hand, opts for a more stylized 3D look. The post-apocalyptic setting gets colors and lines that hark back to the arcade era, but it's impossible not to notice that the character modeling, although decent, doesn't deliver the same instant personality as Street of Rage. The pixelated charm of the old games is there, mixed with the use of dynamic environments and interactive elements, like shattered windows and flying bottles. But sometimes it feels like the graphics want to refer to the past and be modern at the same time, without fully committing to either side. What I like most about Streets of Rage 4 is how the environments tell stories just with their art. Scattered details, vibrant lighting, and references to the golden era of the Mega Drive create an atmosphere that grabs you before the first punch. Each stage seems to have been painted to be played, and there is an impressive wealth of animation frames. Each character has hundreds of individual frames, which makes everything very fluid and pleasant to watch. The special effects of the moves are unique for each fighter, and they help create that explosive and memorable vibe whenever a punch sequence lands. As for Revive, even with the effort to modernize, it lacked that spark. The visual identity of the 16-bit and pastel punk era of other Double Dragon spin-offs seems diluted. The 3D models are competent, but the use of the scenery is often more interesting than the characters themselves. There was a lack of care in the animation transitions, which in some situations become stiff and take away from the fluidity of the battles. The result is good, but not remarkable, falling short of what rival series achieved when modernizing their classics. The gallery mode in Streets of Rage 4 is another differentiator. By unlocking concept art and alternative visualizations, you notice the care taken in the evolution of the characters and scenarios. It's a gift for those who lived the nostalgia of the originals, and for those who appreciate creative processes. The interface, which mixes a classic font and comic book elements, reinforces that retro vibe right in 2020, showing that it's possible to innovate while respecting the legacy. My preference becomes clear. Streets of Rage 4 represents the pinnacle of modern visuals within a classic beat-em-up. It makes you feel like you're inside an animated comic book and keeps you hooked thanks to the strong contrast, the vivid color palette, and the flawless animations. Double Dragon Revive gets some details right in the scenery and atmosphere, but it lacks a strong signature that makes you remember the characters and moves long after playing. It's a good attempt, but Street of Rage shows that visual style is also identity. And for me, few series have understood this so well. Streets of Rage 4 wins you over right away with its fluid gameplay, where each character has their own style, exclusive moves, and automatic combos that bring a real sense of impact. It's one of those games where you feel pleasure in testing every move just to see the result. Especially with the special system, which, besides causing area damage, can be recovered if you chain a sequence without taking hits. The balance between risk and reward invites the player to be bold, adding a strategic tension that weaves through each fight from start to finish. Double Dragon Revive, on the other hand, tries to revive the classic rhythm of the 90s without many changes to the basic mechanics. The commands are familiar: light and heavy attack, jump, special, and grab. The differentiator lies in the more intense use of the scenery and combat tools, allowing you to throw enemies or use objects scattered around the environment. Despite this, the feeling is that the system, although functional, feels stiff and hasn't evolved much compared to modern options in the genre. The combat, in many moments, feels more like a tribute to the past than an attempt to innovate. What makes Streets of Rage 4 truly shine is the depth of its combo mechanics. The use of walls to extend sequences, team interactions and co-op, the variety of special moves, and even the health recovery system after using more powerful moves. Everything was planned to make the gameplay dynamic and rewarding. Compared to other beat-em-ups, Street of Rage encourages the player to aim for high scores and long combos, rewarding creativity and timing without ever breaking the brawling rhythm. In Double Dragon Revive, there are attempts to modernize, like platforming sequences here and there, smarter enemies, cooperative modes for up to 4 players, and anti-air moves. However, the character movement is a bit stiff, with little real differentiation between Billy, Jimmy, and the others. This takes away some of that desire to try all the fighters, as the styles end up repeating themselves. Marion and Ranzo do bring some variety, but nothing that changes the overall feeling of sameness. The co-op in Streets of Rage 4 is another sensational highlight. Playing with friends is chaotic, fun, and allows for various strategies to dominate the stages. The balance between characters and enemies makes everything more balanced, without one build being too dominant. And the bosses require reading movements, strategy, and collaboration. In contrast, the cooperative mode in Double Dragon Revive, although functional, ends up feeling the weight of the mechanics' limitations. The lack of variety in moves and styles makes matches become repetitive before the end of the campaign. Streets of Rage 4 delivers modern gameplay, with tactical depth, a variety of moves, and that addictive feeling of wanting to master every system. It does justice to the franchise's legacy, but makes it clear that evolution is necessary. Double Dragon Revive respects the past, but lacks boldness in its mechanics. It's fun, nostalgic, but doesn't excite as deeply as Street of Rage. The difference lies in what each one does with the classic foundation. Street of Rage amplifies it, while Revive is content to revere it. Streets of Rage 4 stands out for its versatile cast full of personality, where each fighter truly delivers a unique playstyle. Axel is the classic all-rounder, great for those who enjoy direct and powerful combos. Blaze is agile, with fluid moves that alternate between aerial combos and lethal specials. Adam combines speed and dodging, offering that feeling of pure heroism with his precise movements. Cherry, inspired by Skate, is light and fun, great for those who like mobility and acrobatic combos, while Floyd brings the weight of grabs and area attacks, being a colossus in the hands of a strategic player. In Double Dragon Revive, the protagonists Billy and Jimmy return with their classic arsenal, direct punches, spinning kicks, traditional grabs, and a moveset that is very reminiscent of the original games. Marion finally gets the spotlight as a main character, and honestly, she was the biggest surprise for me. She's no longer just the damsel and brings dynamic combos with moves that fit together organically, offering a completely different gameplay experience from the Lee brothers. Ranzo and the extra ninja appear to complement the cast, but they don't have the same charisma as the main protagonists, being more alternatives for variety, but nothing remarkable. The differentiator in Streets of Rage 4 appears in its replayability. Each character offers a different feel, whether through combo speed, unique specials, or grab timing. The survival mode adds unlockable alternative moves, further valuing game time and encouraging mastery of all styles. I felt that Cherry and Floyd, for example, have movesets that favor those looking for challenges, while Axel and Adam work better for those who just want to have fun smashing everything without as much strategy. In Revive, it's clear that the main focus was on the 3 main characters: Billy, Jimmy, and Marion. Marion, in particular, delivers gameplay that feels like it's from almost another game, with better combos and more varied options, becoming a favorite for many players. Ranzo and the ninja, however, are less developed options. The ninja himself seems a bit lost, without a differentiator that really convinces you to stick with him. This disparity in character design makes the experience vary greatly, depending on who you choose in matches. Streets of Rage 4 even gets the enemies and bosses right. Each boss has their own personality, original attack patterns, and animations that make the battles memorable. Whether facing the brutal Mr. Y or one of the stylized henchmen, there's never a lack of variety. It creates that feeling of facing real villains, not just punching bags. Double Dragon Revive tries to innovate with more complex bosses and new patterns, but it sins in its excess of repetition, and many enemies seem reused with little creativity in their behavior. Summing up the experiences, my preference easily goes to Streets of Rage 4. The cast is balanced and diverse, valuing those who like to experiment with fighting styles and truly master each character. I felt that Street of Rage understands that a beat-em-up is about collecting experiences, not just advancing through stages. Double Dragon Revive, on the other hand, relies too much on the main trio, and doesn't explore the cast's potential as well as it could, making the experience less varied, even if it's fun for nostalgia's sake. Streets of Rage 4 is a true masterclass in art direction and level construction. Each stage has its own identity, filled with details and living elements that keep the scenery interesting from start to finish. Whenever I advance a level, I feel the team thought about every urban reference. Subways, overpasses, dark alleys, affluent neighborhoods, arcades, and even police stations, all packed with vibrant colors and nostalgic Easter eggs without ever falling into visual sameness. Double Dragon Revive invests in a post-apocalyptic atmosphere, and this shows up a lot in the stages, with ruined streets, destroyed neighborhoods, and urban environments that convey a sense of abandonment. What's interesting is how interactive. Scenery elements like windows, dumpsters, or even posts and hydrants are part of the strategy. It's fun to use objects and throw enemies into environmental hazards, but the 3D visual of the stages, despite being well done at times, doesn't have the same artistic impact that Street of Rage provides. The pacing of the stages in Streets of Rage 4 is dynamic. It's not enough to just go around hitting things. In each scenario, there are new dangers and unique obstacles. Slippery floors, lasers, speeding trains, and well-designed traps, especially in boss and mini-boss fights. This keeps the gameplay varied and always challenging, even making you want to revisit stages to get a higher score. I like this care in making each scenario memorable not just visually, but also in terms of gameplay. As for Double Dragon Revive, the developers tried to pay homage to the classic maps from the old games, bringing 3D reinterpretations of the iconic stages. The atmosphere is convincing with details like graffiti, destroyed signs, and dramatic lighting. But, unfortunately, the feeling is that some environments are too large and slightly empty, lacking dynamic elements in the background. The fights end up concentrating in monotonous areas in certain stretches. A strong point of Street of Rage is the flow of the stages. They are short but intense, and designed not to be tiring, bringing visual variations at all times, whether in abrupt palette changes or in alternating between closed and open environments. The smart design makes the player always travel from the underworld to the top of the city in a cohesive progression, which goes beyond the screen and creates memories. In the case of Double Dragon Revive, what's missing is precisely this rhythm and variation. Despite the interactive elements and the touch of nostalgia, the stage structure tends to be repetitive, and the scenery serves more as a backdrop than as a living character. I feel that Streets of Rage 4 transforms each stage into a unique experience, while Revive, even with its evolutions and modern feel, doesn't reach the same level of creativity, impact, and personality in its environments. Streets of Rage 4 puts on a real show when it comes to soundtrack and sound effects. The songs are much more than a backdrop. They follow the frantic rhythm of the stages, fitting in electronic timbres and pulsating beats that excite with every brawl sequence. The most impressive thing is how the team of composers managed to create themes that dialogue with the series' roots, and at the same tempo, sound modern and full of energy. Leaving one stage and going straight to another always brings that anxiety to find out which brilliant track will set the mood for the next combat. Double Dragon Revive tries to capture the classic arcade vibe directly through its music, betting heavily on the nostalgia factor. The new versions of the old themes, including the iconic opening theme, are recreated with respect, mixing guitars, keyboards, and even some modern electronic touches. However, despite the care and the well-known names on the composing team, it lacks its own identity, and few tracks really stick in your memory after the stage ends. Those who played it back in the day will enjoy the homage, but I believe it lacked the boldness to etch new melodies into the fans' imagination. The sound quality of Streets of Rage 4 goes beyond the soundtrack. The effects of punches, kicks, explosions, and even the characters' voices are designed to have impact. The sounds have weight. Each weapon feels different, and even the enemies' screams are part of the immersion. The game also allows you to switch to classic soundtracks from the originals, pleasing both those looking for nostalgia and those who want to try something new. A feature I always return to feel the vibe of each generation. In Double Dragon Revive, the energetic soundtrack helps to fuel the battles, but it rarely manages to surprise. The effects are competent, with highlights on the sound of explosions and improvised weapons from the scenery, but the audio, in general, is more functional than memorable. It gives that feeling of, it does its job, without major moments of distinction, and the fighters' shouts or voices don't grab as much attention as they could. It works well within the nostalgic proposal, but it can't go beyond it. Another high point in Street of Rage is the mixing. The soundtrack never overlaps too much with the move effects, and the audio is clean, balancing action and music in a way that amplifies the calculated chaos vibe of the most tense stages. Each boss has a bombastic theme, making the final battles even more epic. This makes a huge difference and personally makes me go back to listen to the soundtrack outside the game, something rare in modern beat-em-ups. In the end, my taste leans towards Streets of Rage 4 again. Not just for the soundtrack composed by stars like Yuzo Koshiro, but for the feeling of impact, variety, and musical creativity that permeates every stage. Double Dragon Revive respects its heritage, delivers energy, but remains stuck in the past without delivering that one track or effect that stands out on its own. Between nostalgia and innovation, Street of Rage brings the most memorable soundtrack with its own identity. And, for those who are fans of music and games, that is simply indispensable. Streets of Rage 4 brings a simple but effective story, which serves as the perfect backdrop for all the brawling. The plot takes place about a decade after the end of the original trilogy, with the city of Wood Oak now being threatened by the Y-Twins. The children of the legendary Mr. X Axel, Blaze, and company return to action to face a criminal organization that even controls the local police. The plot doesn't aim for complexity. It's direct, clear, and full of 80s rhythm, working perfectly to get players right into the action and justify each new stage. Double Dragon Revive follows a similar line, embracing nostalgia and reimagining classic moments from the franchise, but with some new twists. This time, the world is post-apocalyptic, dominated by the Shadow Warriors gangs, while Billy and Jimmy Lee defend the Sosetsuken Dojo and set out in search of Marion, who mysteriously disappears. But isn't just kidnapped, she herself takes on a protagonist role and joins the group. The plot tries to delve into the mystical, draconic vein energy, which serves as motivation for the battles and the villains' experiments, but overall the script is simple, without major twists or deepening of the characters' dilemmas. The charm of Street of Rage lies in its narrative delivery through comic book-style cutscenes between stages, filled with excitement and references to previous games. Although many of these scenes focus more on action than on dialogue, they manage to create a connection with the characters and convey the journey's atmosphere. Biographical details of the protagonists appear in the extras, giving context for those who like to know the story behind the fighters and justifying new faces like Cherry and Floyd in the cast. Double Dragon Revive opts for short animated scenes and dialogues dubbed in English and Japanese, supported by static screens. It's a structure that fulfills its role well, approaching the classic arcade formula. But it hardly surprises. The highlight is seeing Marion gain prominence, breaking the old damsel in distress cliché. The rest relies on the old martial art versus unbeatable gang duel, which ends up being more of a tribute than a narrative renewal. In practice, both bet on plots that just justify the brawling without seeking drama or deep character development. Streets of Rage 4 stands out by creating a sense of progression and atmosphere, making the player feel like they are cleaning up the city little by little, while Double Dragon Revive chooses a by-the-book story, where everything serves more to tie the classic stages and confrontations together. My preference goes to the proposal of Streets of Rage 4, which manages to balance nostalgia and modernity, giving the protagonist simple but charismatic motivations, and creating an engaging atmosphere. Double Dragon Revive is correct in honoring its legacy, but lacks the boldness to go further, getting stuck in traditional solutions that don't create great memorable moments. In the end, both plots deliver what is necessary, but Street of Rage excels due to the charm of its cutscenes and its pacing. Streets of Rage 4 is a benchmark when it comes to modern features and beat-em-ups. The game features a system for unlocking retro characters and concept art, inviting the player to revisit stages and explore additional modes like Survival, where the brawling scales to epic levels. Furthermore, the multiplayer is not limited to the story mode, offering various cooperative and versus challenges, including competition for a better scores and strategies. The difficulty settings are flexible, ranging from casual to insane, keeping the game alive long after finishing it. Double Dragon Revive, despite inserting modern 3D graphics and online local multiplayer, is more timid with extras. The main feature is the extra mode, which brings missions with specific objectives, like defeating enemies without taking damage, or performing extensive combos, but the overall package is more traditional. In campaign mode, there is interaction with environments, weapons used, environmental hazards, and collectibles, and pre-order bonuses like Double Dragon Dodgeball minigames. The online co-op is functional, but limited to 2 players, without more elaborate party modes. The great thing about Street of Rage is that everything was designed to extend its longevity. Trophies, achievements, unlocking alternative skins, and even global ranking systems. The extra menus reveal everything from unused designs to alternative animations, creating that franchise museum vibe with content for those who like to dig into every detail. The Mr. X Nightmare DLC adds even more characters, weapons, and new features, making the experience expansive and almost infinite for fans. Revive, on the other hand, stands out for its strategic mechanics like charged attacks and using the scenery for instant defeats, which encourages speedruns and different playstyles. Ranzo and Marion bring distinct combat approaches in the challenge modes, but the variations stop there. There is no real progression of extras or customizations for the fighters, and alternative endings are scarce. The bosses are creative, but the overall package doesn't evolve much over time. In Street of Rage, the extra modes value the replay factor and create reasons to play with friends, whether to unlock everything, accumulate points, or compete to see who survives the longest. The online leaderboards and global achievements give the game an active community feel, always stimulating new content and crazy combinations of moves and characters. Even for those who have already finished, there are always reasons to come back. Overall, Streets of Rage 4 dominates because it is always thinking about the future of the beat-em-up, while Double Dragon Revive focuses on tradition with small improvements and specific extras. Street of Rage becomes a benchmark by delivering robust modes, challenges, unlockables, and even DLCs. Revive bets on the basics, pleasing those who want a classic, one-and-done experience, but leaving something to be desired for those who like to dive deep into modern extras. If I had to summarize the duel between the two, I'd say that Street of Rage gets the upper hand on practically every important front for a beat-em-up. And it's not just because of the technical polish, but because of how it understands the soul of the genre and transcends nostalgia. Streets of Rage 4 grows with each new playthrough. Its visuals are handcrafted, the animations are jaw-dropping, and the gameplay manages to be dense and accessible at the same time, with enough depth to challenge even those who have marathoned dozens of classics. It's a game that doesn't reinvent the wheel, but knows exactly where to modernize and where to preserve the DNA that made the franchise famous. Double Dragon Revive tries to bring the franchise back to the top, betting on classic elements, stylized 3D environments, and a post-apocalyptic vibe that gets the visual atmosphere right. It has its hits, like a playable Marion, references, and an authentic nostalgic feeling. But it stumbles in the evolution of its gameplay, the lack of depth in its extras, and the repetitiveness of its stages. It's a fun title, especially for die-hard fans, but it hardly makes the same mark as its contemporary rival. The respect for its history is undeniable, but there is little boldness to innovate, and that makes a difference in a genre where those who reinvent themselves stand out. In the characters department, Streets of Rage 4 offers variety, personality, and animations that make each choice relevant, not to mention the dozens of unlockable fighters and game modes that truly value the replay factor. In contrast, Revive delivers 4 competent playable characters, but they lack more daring differentiation or customization. The cast works, but it doesn't surprise or create strong bonds. When I think of music, sound, extras, and modern features, Street of Rage pulls ahead again. There are iconic tracks, polished effects, survival modes, online leaderboards, achievements, art to unlock, and DLCs that continue to expand the game's potential. Double Dragon Revive makes an effort with extra modes and an honest co-op, but its proposal remains limited and ends up not giving real reasons to return after the credits. Even in the plot and atmosphere building, Streets of Rage 4 knows how to balance retro nostalgia with modernity. The cutscenes have charisma, the dialogues have flavor, and the sense of progression is always gratifying. Revive bets on homages to the old classics, but doesn't risk new ideas, serving a more nostalgic audience than one thirsty for the new. To conclude, Streets of Rage 4 is, without a doubt, the most complete and vibrant package of these two worlds. It honors the history of beat-em-ups without being afraid to grow, to innovate, and to invite new audiences. Double Dragon Revive entertains, is competent in the basics, but falls short when placed side by side with what Street of Rage offers. In the end, for those looking for the most memorable, modern, and exciting experience in this genre, Street of Rage is, by far, the best choice.